Hi, I'm from UK. You're watching the stream Home Edition. Today we're going to look at the many challenges that lie ahead for President-elect Joe Biden and his plans for his first few weeks in office. This is what Curtis Morrison, who is an immigration lawyer, told us a little bit earlier.
From my point of view, the first 100 days of the Biden-Harris administration needs to be about reversing this America First policy and replacing it with a we care about our neighbors policy. It's a mental illness to think that other countries, other foreign nationals have to suffer in order for us to thrive. And we need to replace that with a more compassionate approach to government. Take immigration. If we accept refugees and immigrants, that is the best diplomatic tool we have to have peace with our neighbors. And so that's the transition I would like to see.
That is Curtis's view. What's yours? Today is a chance for you to unleash your international political pundit. If you're on YouTube, you know what to do. Jump into the comments section and be part of today's show. I am going to say hello to the guests. The guests will introduce themselves to you, taking the political temperature literally and also metaphorically in Washington, D.C. Alan Fisher. Alan, introduce yourself to our international audience and your co-panelists.
Hi there, I'm Alan Fisher. I'm the senior correspondent for Al Jazeera English based in Washington, D.C. I have covered the Trump campaign 4 years ago and covered the Biden campaign all the way up to Election Day. I was here on election night, just outside the White House, and followed all the results as they came in, and the eventual winner, of course, being Joe Biden.
Thank you, Alan. More from Alan in just a moment. Noelle, welcome back to the stream. Remind our audience who you are and what you do.
Hi, thank you. This is Noelle Nickpour, and I am here from Palm Beach in Florida. And I am a national Republican strategist and fundraiser, author of the book Branding America.
Welcome. And Brianna, great to have you on the stream. Tell everybody who you are, what you do.
I am the former National Press Secretary for the Bernie 2020 campaign. I'm the co-host of Bad Faith Podcast with Virgil, Texas, and I'm also a contributing editor at Current Affairs magazine.
Guests, let me take you back to November the 7th when Joe Biden made his victory speech. It almost seemed in this speech that he was outlining who his team would be come January 2021. Let's have a listen.
I'm proud of the campaign we built and ran. I'm proud of the coalition we put together. The broadest and most diverse coalition in history. Democrats, Republicans, independents, progressives, moderates, conservatives, young, old, urban, suburban, rural, gay, straight, transgender, white, Latino, Asian, Native American. I mean it, especially those moments, and especially those moments when this campaign was at its lowest ebb. The African American community stood up again for me. You've always had my back, and I'll have yours.
I am wondering then, that was almost a pledge, that was a promise, that was a thank you, and now I'm going to do good by you. Brianna, how's it looking so far with Biden's picks?
Unfortunately, not so good. One of the groups that he mentioned was progressives. Bernie Sanders' coalition and additionally people like Elizabeth Warren represented something like 30 to 40% of the Democratic Party. And yet not a single one of Joe Biden's administration picks are reflective of their progressive movement. They're not from the progressive movement. Nobody from the Bernie camp has been managed to be given a single appointment. Another group that he nodded to specifically was African Americans. Black voters are perceived to have really put Joe Biden over the line, namely in South Carolina, where Jim Clyburn, a Black congressman of particular stature, gave him a last-minute endorsement that was able to help Biden win that state and turn around a string of embarrassing primary losses where he came in 4th and 5th place. And yet, the news from last week was of a leaked call with Black figureheads from all of the major civil rights organizations in America, in which Biden was largely dismissive of their very, discreet, considered requests for their various organizing groups, right? And it's not clear that even with that public pressure and the embarrassment of that call being leaked, that there's any indication he's going to turn it around.
Noel, what does the Republican strategists make of the Biden picks so far? What stands out for you, or who stands out for you?
I think one of the most important picks that I was focused on was the federal Treasury, and I was looking more at the economic side of what Biden was going to do. A lot of Republicans are very, very pleased, as well I am, for Janet Yellen. Janet Yellen knows exactly what she was doing when she worked under the Obama administration. If you'll remember, Trump and Hillary Clinton were running against each other, and it was in August, right up before the election. She was in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, and announced that there would not be a rate hike. So I think that she knows what she's doing. I'm very, very pleased with that one. As far as the rest of his picks, I think they're pretty reasonable, and I can understand why, if you worked for Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren, you probably would not be that pleased for some of the most, more reasonable picks that we feel like Biden has made. The only one that, I disagreed with pretty much was the John Kerry pick with climate. I feel like they may have been better suited to put someone a little bit more progressive that would have something to the progressive base that helped Joe Biden get elected. I really feel like that was one seat that he actually could have put someone that would have been a progressive there in that seat.
Let me just pause for a moment and bring in Janet Yellen. Janet Yellen will be, if she is agreed by Congress, to be the Treasury Secretary. So let's have a listen to what she had to say.
Inaction will produce a self-reinforcing downturn, causing yet more devastation. And we risk missing the obligation to address deeper structural problems: inequality, stagnant wages, especially for workers who lack a college education, communities that have seen industry disappear with no good jobs replacing lost ones, racial disparities in pay, job opportunities, housing, food security.
Alan, Joe Biden said that he wanted to have a cabinet that looked like America. What does it look like to you so far?
Well, I think he's getting closer to it, and we're hearing speculation that he may well appoint the first Native American to a cabinet position to become the Interior Secretary. And so that, I think, is a step in the right direction when he makes the cabinet more reflective of what America is like as a whole. I think Brianna makes a very good point that there aren't progressives there. In a lot of these positions, it's same old, same old. It's people that's been around Washington for a very, very long time. There are no really dramatic new names, no great new thinking that you suddenly believe is going to change the face of the Biden administration. I think real politics dictate that you really have got to try and appoint people that you know will get through the Senate. And at the moment, with the results still to come from the runoffs in Georgia, the Senate's controlled by the Republicans. So you've got to get through that. And certainly hearings in the Senate over the last couple of years have become much more contentious, much more difficult. But when you hear Janet Yellen speaking, now that she's freed from the constraints of speaking from the Fed, she might be a surprise. She might be a real surprise when it comes to progressive thought in a key position as well at the Treasury. So I think that there are certainly those who think that it's not as progressive are probably right. But you've always got to remember that the cabinet will reflect the president. He sets the plays. He says, this is what we're going to do, and they go out and execute it. So while there might not be progressives in the cabinet, it's really up to Joe Biden to be more progressive than the people that are in his cabinet.
Brianna, go ahead.
If I may, even though if Joe Biden sets the tone, that would probably indicate that you should get a moderate it to conservative Democrat in these seats. And yet Joe Biden is going it so far as to put Republicans on his transition team, and now is floating the idea of a Republican for Commerce Secretary. Meg Whitman, a corporate CEO, is among these names. So the concern here is, fine, if the expectation is that Joe Biden is a moderate to conservative Democrat who's going to appoint moderate to conservative Democrats, that's fine. But if he's going to be making overtures to the people who he perceives to have helped him win, the people who really helped him win were the 30-40% of the Democratic base who are progressive, the disproportionate number of Democratic voters who are Black, who disproportionately vote for Democrats every 2 to 4 years. And principally, a lot of these progressive groups that did door knocking when the Biden campaign decided not to door knock because of the COVID pandemic, right? And instead, what you had was this elevation of these never Trump Republicans, for most typified by the Lincoln Project, which was a group run by never Trump Republicans and raised over $70 million for these anti-Trump ads, with the idea that it was going to convince a significant number of moderate Republicans in the suburbs. Suburban white women were a key demographic who were frustrated with Trump's bombast, his uncouthness, his rudeness, his lack of decorum, and would be willing to vote for Democrats. But in fact, more registered Republicans voted in 2020 than they did in 2016. And all of that money went to waste, and yet that group is still being rewarded.
Brianna, I'm just wondering, as a progressive, are you furious with what's looking like it will be the cabinet for 2021? Are you really mad?
I don't know that I would describe it as fury, since there's no surprises about who Joe Biden is. He ran explicitly telling a group of donors fairly early in the campaign that, quote, nothing would fundamentally change. And that message has only gotten more galling as the world has changed dramatically for the worse in the midst of an unprecedented economic and health crisis. If we didn't overwhelmingly want policies like Medicare for all before, America being the only industrialized country in the world that doesn't provide guaranteed health care, free at point of service health care to its population, now people are clamoring for it. And it is just disappointing, is the word I would use, that he still doesn't think that we need fundamental change in this country.
Alan, on YouTube, I've got William Sanderson, and William Sanderson makes this point. I'm just curious to see how you bounce off this one. The US doesn't unite over domestic matters. It's not meant to. It's not designed to. So there should be some friction about who these picks are. Not everybody's going to be happy in the Democratic Party. Your take is what, Alan?
That you've got to deal with real politic, which means you've got to get people who will get through the confirmation process. And I think Brianna's right. I mean, we know what Joe Biden is. We know that he is a conservative Democrat with some progressive traits in him. Has he been changed by conversations with the likes of Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren? Well, I think we'll find out after January the 20th. But there is a call from the ground of the Democratic Party that it has to be more radical, that it has to take more chances. I think, again, talking about realpolitik, and that's the third time I've used that phrase, so I've got to stop that. I'm not entirely sure anyone else in the race could have beaten Donald Trump. I'm not sure that Elizabeth Warren could have done it. I'm not sure that Bernie Sanders could have done it. I'm not sure they would have got the widespread coalition that would be enough to beat Donald Trump. Remember, Donald Trump got more votes than any sitting president has ever managed before. He got 70 million votes. Now, he was beaten significantly by Joe Biden, but I'm not sure there's another Democrat in the race that would have been able to beat Donald Trump. So the question that progressives have to ask, who would you rather have in office? Would you rather have Joe Biden or Donald Trump? And I'm sure they would say Joe Biden, because 4 years ago, I think people thought that Hillary Clinton was going to win no matter what, and they didn't go out and vote, and they got Donald Trump. And a lot of progressives and a lot of Democrats who didn't vote were very upset with what came for the next 4 years.
Noel.
I gotta, oh, sorry, please.
I'll let Noel go first, and then Brianna, you come off the back of Noel. Noel, go ahead.
Well, I will tell you that is exactly what I feel, and I think that's exactly why progressive did not win the nomination, because I think Trump would have beat a progressive. I do not, the Republicans were touting, and they're doing it in Georgia right now with the Georgia special election runoff, socialism. And what the progressives represent to middle America is socialism. We picked up a couple of House of Representatives seats in Florida with Cuban Americans from the very idea of they've been to a country, they came from a country where socialism, it did not work. I think that Joe Biden was the only candidate that could have actually beat, and he did, Donald Trump, because a lot of middle America viewed him as reasonable. He was with Barack Obama. He campaigned, as his vice president. They knew exactly what they were going to get. And I don't think that people were really willing to nominate someone like Elizabeth Warren, someone that's very far to the left, like our Bernie Sanders. And I think that, you make a fantastic point by saying that the Democrats probably would not have beat Donald Trump if it wasn't for someone that appeared more reasonable, which was Joe Biden.
Before I unleash Brianna on both of you, let me just remind you, she's the National Press Secretary of the Bernie Sanders presidential campaign. Just reminding our audience about that, Brianna. Go ahead.
Okay, so certainly most Democratic voters believe that the only person who could beat Donald Trump was Joe Biden, and that's why they voted for Joe Biden. Majority of Joe Biden supporters didn't even like Joe Biden. They just repeated the media talking point that Joe Biden was the only person who can beat Trump. The reality is that Joe Biden isn't reasonable or moderate when you actually judge what the policy preferences of American voters are. 88% of Democrats support Medicare for all, for instance, and 50% of Republicans approximately do as well. Overwhelming majorities of Americans support marijuana legalization. Joe Biden doesn't. And a significant percentage of Joe Biden voters actually misunderstood and thought he did support Medicare for all, partly because he kept saying things like healthcare is a human right when he had no intention of providing it. So the reality is Bernie Sanders, in contrast, had the largest donor base in the party without taking any corporate money. More individuals voted to Bernie Sanders than any president in American history, and more Black voters gave to his campaign than ever in American history. He won the first 3 primary contests, including Nevada, with 70% of the Latino vote, a voter share that was extremely instrumental in winning the election, in which a lot of moderates and conservatives hand-wrung and said, Bernie Sanders is going to win Florida, ignoring the fact that he was the overwhelming preference of Latino voters. And in Florida, what happened? What we saw was progressive ballot measures won and Joe Biden lost. The Democratic Party in Florida decided to distance itself from a $15 minimum wage because they said even that was too radical. That was too far left. And a $15 minimum wage won, and Joe Biden lost the state. And we had 2 weeks of uncertainty about who the president of the United States was even going to be because the margins were so thin, and Joe Biden did such a poor job of managing to reset the country and win the country after Donald Trump had demonstrated himself to be a boorish, well, let me curb my language, but to be a boorish embarrassment, shall we say, for the country. And that is not where we need to be, not to mention the horrible down ballot effects that Joe Biden generated by being an unenthusiastic candidate, or a candidate rather that didn't generate a lot of enthusiasm, and who actually worked to pull more Republicans out to vote in a way that really had cataclysmic effects down ballot. Had he appealed to a progressive base, a base that's struggling, a base that's dying because of a lack of health care, a base that's unemployed, 14 million Americans thrown off their health insurance because in America, if you don't have a job, you don't have insurance, that's cataclysmic. That could have given him the kind of margins that we could celebrate.
All right, I'm going to ask
Can I
you,
just say, someone who grew
everybody,
up in Europe, sorry,
just
can I
very
just say, someone who
briefly,
grew
Alan,
up
go
in
ahead.
Europe, Americans
Go ahead.
don't really have an idea of what socialism is. I mean, they've got this idea of socialism, and it's not what we would consider the European model. I think when Americans say, oh, this is socialism, they actually think of Soviet Union, Russia, whereas socialism for people in Europe, you think more Sweden, the United Kingdom under a Labour government, France, socialism, that sort of thing. Certainly not the much more extreme view of that which you get in America.
Let me just ask you,
that's right.
all of you, guests, just very briefly, this comes from Censored for the Truth on YouTube. They want to know, do you think Biden can unite Americans? And I'm just literally going to go, Noel, Brianna, Alan, Noel.
Yes, I actually think that Biden can unite, and especially if he does something like a Meg Whitman, which was, a Republican. I think diverse picks, and including even Republicans, and you've got all kinds of diversity on that panel. I think
So
that
a
his
yes from
yes,
Noel.
yes.
Alan, Biden the uniter?
I think he'll attract more people towards the middle, but I think there will. American politics is very divisive and divided, and I don't see that changing over the next 4 years markedly.
Brianna.
He could by advocating for a New Deal to lift America out of the economic and health crisis it's in right now, but he won't because he was elected on the basis of being a corporate candidate.
Earlier on today, Kamala Harris, the Vice President-elect, was talking about the first 100 days of the new administration. One of the issues is getting a stimulus package for people who are suffering from coronavirus. On the first 100 days, there's so much that the next administration say they want to do. Here's Kamala Harris, first of all, and I'd love to hear your thoughts about that guest. Let's hear from the VP.
The moratoriums on evictions and foreclosures are about to end. The people here in Washington, D.C. have got to stop living in a bubble. The people have a right to expect that their leaders in Congress see them and act in their best interest. I can speak for Joe and me. We were elected to do a job, and we intend to bring everybody along who wants to do the job with us.
What is your priority, Brianna, for what happens in the first 100 days?
Given the kind of bailout people across the world, particularly in Europe, have gotten because of stay-at-home orders because of COVID, it might surprise them to learn that in America, we got one $1,200 check only if you met a certain income cutoff, and a limited $600 boost to unemployment benefits that ended months ago. And since then, there's been nothing. And even more importantly, at no point during the campaign did Joe Biden or Kamala Harris did when she was running, but Joe Biden has never advocated for restarting stimulus checks. Never. And the press doesn't really ask him about it. So there's a lot of, I think, pomp and circumstance and kind of rhetorical bluster. But the reality is the Democrats could be really running strong, including in these Georgia races, on the idea of giving stimulus checks to Americans who desperately need them. That's what I'd like to hear out of both of those leaders.
I have a minute left to wrap up, Alan. So I'm going to ask you very, very briefly. I have a day one agenda for President-elect Joe Biden. Rejoin the Paris Agreement, rejoin WHO, raise corporate tax to 28%. This is day one agenda. What about the first 100 days? What's possible?
He's really got to look at COVID, and he's got to look at financial stimulus. And you've got to remember that when Obama came in with Biden as his running mate, they had just put billions and billions and billions of money into the financial system because the banks were on the verge of collapse. Now, saving the financial system was important, but they've got to look at that level of stimulus to try and regenerate the economy, and also to help people who will desperately need that level of help because of what's happened during COVID.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you, Alan and Brianna and Noel, bringing different perspectives to what will this Joe Biden administration look like and how is it coming together. Have a look here on my laptop. We always take our conversations a little bit further when we go onto Instagram Live, and we're doing that a little bit later. So at 20:30 GMT, starting from Wednesday, we will have a conversation. You will be able to have a conversation with Dr. Cornel West. He's a professor and philosopher. I know you know who he is. He's going to be very candid about where we are right now with this Vice President-elect and the President-elect as they begin to form what they want the new administration to be like. If you're on Instagram Live, I can highly recommend that conversation coming up very shortly. But for now, that wraps up this home edition episode of The Stream. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Take care, everybody.